should have filmed this like a week and a half ago. It did take me a little bit longer to read Numbers, but I also just haven't had time to film. And then today and yesterday I had time to film and I didn't. Today I was taking a nap and I literally woke myself up because I was like, go film your video. You'll feel better. You won't have to keep rearranging your, like, my YouTube calendar, content calendar, all that stuff. So I have my notes here. Oh, I had a couple of things I wanted to say before we jump right into this. One, I know this reading plan is intense. It's been hard for me. Even like reading some of these books in like 5 days hasn't been happening. So if you feel like you are not doing it, cut it down. Take longer. That's why when I created this, one moment, grab it. That's why when I made this plan, I did do a calendar view. Like if you just need help staying on track, but there's a lot to read here. There's a lot. You might not have time to read 13 chapters one day. That's why I also just did like a 1 through whatever. If you are taking a little bit longer to read a section, that's fine. If it takes you 3 days to read, the 13 chapters at the end of Genesis, that's fine. And then just cross it off once you get there. So I did want to say that. Like, I've been having to do that. There are some days where, sure, 13 chapters is great. When I'm reading the book of Numbers, it was not easy. It was not easy to get through this book in, the 5 days I allotted. If my job was just to do YouTube, it would have been done. Like, that's a dream. To be able to just sit here and make content about God's word, that would be great. But unfortunately, that is not my job. 1, it's a lot. 2, I think I was naive to think that, these videos would not take over my life. Since we're reading the Bible through in like 9.5 months, not really a full year, like 9.5 months. It's like a recap video every week, sometimes twice a week. And that is a lot because it's now taking me longer to actually read these chapters because I'm also taking notes. So I can give you guys some sort of a well-rounded recap. Obviously, we're not going in depth because I do not have time to go in depth and I would love to. I think maybe in the future doing an in-depth Bible study with you guys where we pick a chapter or a few verses, we pick a book and go through it slowly every week. That would be amazing, but I don't have the time for that. Prepping for just this alone, when I do my Bible reading in the morning, a solid hour, and that's just me reading through and jotting down notes that I see, not even going in depth, not even looking up certain things. Yeah, I just figured I'd share that because if anyone's feeling a little overwhelmed by this, it's okay. This plan has been a lot, but I'm loving it. But since I did make commitments to do these recap videos, that's what most of my content is going to be for the foreseeable future. It's going to be a recap video every week, maybe twice a week because that's what we have, but I'm trying to throw in extra content too. If you want a full in-depth go through of all my resources, I can leave that link down below. Made a video about that at the beginning of the year. Oh, I figured I should introduce myself. I feel like I don't in my videos, but I'm Sarah. Hi. This is my channel, Magnified Faith. You can follow me on Instagram and you can follow me on TikTok too. My TikTok's a mess. I literally just post whatever when I feel like it. I also have an art channel which I've not been posting on, which is Seamlessly Creating. Instagram, TikTok too. And yeah, my new obsession has been puzzling. As you can see, my pile of puzzles right there. I also bought a puzzling board, which is this thing right here. And that's kind of what I've been doing right now with my life and my free time, besides making videos and talking about Jesus. Let's get right into this, because it's going to be a while. We've already been talking for 7 minutes, and we've not even opened the Bible. So, something that did surprise me is how much notes I had in Numbers. I did not think that I would have a ton of notes in this book, but I forgot that I read through it last year. When I was going through the Bible, page got all wrinkly. If you guys would like to see a video also how you can Bible journal in a Bible that's not a Bible journal, let me know, because I used to primarily journal in this Bible, and it's not a Bible journal, but my page got all wrinkly. Here in Numbers, obviously what we're going to see is a census of the people. So in the beginning we see 2 types of census. One of like the men, the warriors, the people that would go out and fight, and then of the Levites. But we also have a census in the beginning and then a census towards the end of the book when, after God declares that they will wander for 40 years and then, 40 years pass, all the people die, and there's another census of the new group of Israelites. So 2 censuses throughout this book. And I had wanted to read something from here. As an introduction, it has said, the book of Numbers describes Israel's experience with the Lord in the wilderness. As such, it is a study of God's providence in the life of an emerging nation. Too often, Numbers is valued for little more than its list of places, events, and persons, but the book is also a documentary on the way in which the Lord led the Hebrews for an entire generation before fulfilling their dreams of a land with a settled people. Just as an entire camp was established around the presence of God as symbolized in the tabernacle, so the whole book revolves around the centrality of God. Understanding the name, contents, structure, purpose, and abiding truth of the book may enhance its continuing value for the people of God. Then I also like what it says here. The fourth book of the Bible takes its English name from that in the Latin Vulgate Numeri, which was dependent on the Greek translation of the Old Testament. It says the name Numbers hardly comprehends the primary thrust of the book's contents. The name of the book in Hebrew canon is In the Wilderness, which summarizes well the focus of this book. It is concerned with God's providence as he led the Hebrews through the wilderness following the exodus out of Egypt and the sojourn at Mount Sinai. So I just enjoyed that little bit. I don't need this again. So popped the spine of my book. Okay, breaking books here. Literally just popped the spine of my book. So fun. Yes, this one had a chart in the back because as you read in chapter 2, you see how the people, the tribes are positioned as they carry the Ark of Covenant and all that stuff, with the Levites in the middle, with the Ark and all that stuff, and also how they camp with everything around. So I think this does a good job just kind of showing you what everything looked like, where the tribes were, and all that fun stuff. It's what thing I like about these little tabernacle pamphlets. I'll leave it listed down below because it just has a bunch of information on the actual tabernacle. I feel like I didn't speak today. My goodness. And then we read about the duties of the sons of Aaron, the Levites, and all that they had to do within the tabernacle and all that fun stuff. Also, they were instructed on how they were to move the tent and move the ark. And I think I discussed that a little bit in Exodus when we were explaining what it looked like. Other pamphlet, which is nice, like the little picture. And I told you how it reminded me of like royalty and how we moved kings and all that fun stuff. But I do have a note here for chapter 4, verses 15. In verse 15, it says, "But they must not touch holy things, lest they die." And I feel like you see this all throughout the Old Testament, especially as like Israel and all them going to war and people take the ark. I'm trying to remember where exactly it was, but I think it was during David's time when like the enemies took the ark and they put it in like their holy spot, but like someone touched it, they died. Things happen, or you go to catch the ark and you die. Like, it's holy. It's God's holy dwelling place, so you touch it, you die. And then I just put here a note to review chapters 1 through 4. There were a lot of people. It's basically what you learn. Just counting the men that were 20 and over of able bodies to fight, it was over 600,000 men. That's just the men. That's not counting women, children, or the Levites, if I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Tons of people. Moses and Aaron were leading at least about 1 million people through the wilderness and being in charge of them. And I feel like reading that made me understand Moses a lot more and actually like feel bad for him. Like, he was dealing with all these people and they constantly just complained. Something I realized, especially now reading through the Old Testament again, I've read it before, read it multiple times, and it's always been about faith with God. And I feel like this time it just actually clicked. Like, I know it, but it clicked because, we just think about all the rules and everything that everyone had to follow. But a big part of it was just like faith. In chapter 5, verse 6, it says, "Speak to the people of Israel when a man or woman commits any of the sins that that people commit by breaking faith with the Lord." And that just made me realize that, sure, they had all these rules, but the Lord really wanted what was in their heart. He wanted a place in their heart. He wanted to be thought of first, to be prioritized. He wanted them to place their faith in Him. And that's something the people did not do. Even verse 7, as you keep reading, it says, "He shall confess his sin that he has committed and he shall make full restitution. So even there you see like everything that Jesus does for us, God had put in place for these people, and it was all dependent on their faith. God knew they weren't a perfect people. He knew that they would slip up when it came to doing the sacrifices and doing everything. And what he was really looking at was their faith. Chapter 6, the Nazarite vow. I have notes here. The Nazarite vow was, Nazarite is a Hebrew verb which means to dedicate, concentrate, or separate. Like holy and holiness in Hebrews, it means to be separate. Nazarite and holy life, they're kind of like the same thing. Nazarite and a holy life. You're kind of like promising to be separated to live out a holy life. Samson was a Nazarite. His parents or God declared like that he would live. The Nazarite vow was upon him. There was 2 marks of this. 1, no strong drink or wine, even off the grapevine. Oh, there was 3 marks. 2, no cutting of the hair, and 3, separation from the dead bodies. Which, did Samson break all of them? I can't remember. Okay, so their consecration was not an ascetic separation, but rather an expression of loyalty to God, in which such forms of abstinence were illustrative of a larger commitment of life to God. It's one of the notes that I put in my Bible. I didn't put it, it's just sticky note in there because I've literally not had time to actually Bible journal, and I'm hoping I have time to do that with you guys soon. That's one of my video plans for this week. And then you see the next verses, verses 22 to 28. Let me read it from this Bible because it's one of my Bible mistakes. I put a little sticker over this part when I had studied it, thinking it would be more translucent. So it's, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, thus you shall bless the people of Israel. You shall say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So shall they put my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them. So it's kind of like, just like the Lord's Prayer, this blessing is looked as a model for prayer. It has a clear purpose. It communicates the Lord's desire to invest in his people with his name. Only God alone can bless his people, keep his people, look on them with favor, be gracious towards them, and give them peace. I like that one. So I have like a little thing in here. I should actually just stick that into my Bible, but it's not. And if you know the blessing from Carrie Job, it's literally this chunk of scripture sung. Okay, chapter 7. In chapter 7, each tribe gives an offering, and I always find the order of which tribes are, I was going to say numbered, tribes are listed very interesting. Here, I believe Judah is first. He who offered his offering the first day was Nahshon, the son of Amminadab of the tribe of Judah. Judah is listed first. Most of the times when they're listing the tribes, you will find Judah listed first. Jesus comes from the line of Judah. Judah's number 1. That is always something I keep track of. Went to a different church a couple weeks ago, and the pastor was going through Revelations, and he also said like this is a different, the way they name the order of the tribes that was mentioned was different, but Judah is still first. So that's something that now I'm looking out for, is how they name the tribes. And I know in Judges, when they go through each of the tribes taking their land, or what they didn't do because they didn't do it fully, Judah is also named first. We're going to skip a little bit ahead of Numbers, because then they talk about this is the first Passover they have celebrated. They've been in the wild for a year. And something I also did look up, I'll put a picture here of a map that I just looked up how they traveled. Because I can't picture it in mind. I don't know geography, so I just looked up how they traveled. And I remember when we went through Exodus, we talked about how they did not travel a certain way when they left Egypt because God didn't want them to fight. But just, it's interesting how close they were to their promised land as they've been wandering. Helicopter. we're talking about all the stuff that they heard, the cloud covering of the tabernacle, the silver of the tabernacle, Israel leaves Sinai. And then the people complain. Chapter 11. It does not take long for the people to complain. It's really frustrating for me, so I can only imagine how frustrating it was for Moses and Aaron to lead these people, how frustrating it is for the Lord. But then again, we are just like them. And that's why I think it's so frustrating for me to read the Old Testament, and why I get so upset is because these people are just so frustrating. Yet when I think of my own life and how I am on a daily basis, the Lord is probably just as frustrated with me, because it's so easy to forget our blessings and to just ponder on the things that are going wrong in life. So chapter 11, the people start to complain, and Moses complains to the Lord, and I'm realizing that Moses is not complaining to God. Like, he always says, like, Lord, how have you put these people on me? This burden is on me, And I don't think it was him crying out to him. Well, it is him crying out to him, but less in a complaining voice, but in like a, Lord, give me strength. Like, I'm sharing my struggles with you. Like, don't we do that to God too? Like, when we are struggling and going through something, we cry out to him. That's what I'm realizing. Moses is not complaining to the Lord. He's crying out to the Lord. And I need to remember that and have more grace, because sometimes I'm like, Moses, you as a leader, like, calm down. But it's like, he's crying out to the Lord, which is what God wants us to do. And many times the Lord hears him, and Moses keeps the Lord's wrath from the people because he is petitioning on their behalf. So Moses cries out to the Lord, that his burden is too great, and why was he given these people? Which I understand that. Like, I would be wondering why I've got these complainers and these ungrateful people with me. And the Lord is so gracious. His anger was kindled against them first, but he also takes care of them. I remember writing this, and I was like, wow, the Lord is so great. Which he is. Not saying that he's not. But it's so funny, because I'm just like, wow, these people complain and God still takes care of them. But it's so funny, like, because God's still also angry, because he wants these people to be grateful for the things that he has given them. This is when they were complaining about all the great food they had in Egypt. Now the ramble that was among them, this is verse 4. The ramble that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, oh, that we had a meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. Which verse? The manna. All we have is this manna. God literally made bread fall from the sky, magically appeared. Like, this was a miracle in itself that they would be able to be fed every single day since they've been there, just through magic bread. And they're like, all we have is this bread. At first I was like, you know what? The Lord is so kind to bless them. I would not have blessed them. And you know what? He did. He gave quail. But then I don't remember this part of the historic account at all. He did provide quail, but anyone who took of the quail died. Verse 31, we're in chapter 11, it says, then a wind from the Lord sprang up, and it brought quail from the sea, and let them fall beside the camp, and a day's journey on the side, and a day's journey on the other side, around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the ground. And the people rose all that day, and all that night, and the next day, and gathered their quail. I guess they weren't grabbing bread, because if they had to travel to go get this quail, they wasn't grabbing bread. Those who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. While the meat was yet between their teeth, before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck down the people with a very great plague. Therefore, the name of the place was called Kibroth. I don't know when this stopped. Yeah, that happened, and I think I agree with that more than I agree with God just giving them meat. Chapter 12. And what I think is funny, before we get to chapter 12, is how quick the Israelites were. They were quick to remember all the great stuff they had in Egypt. Yet they forgot they were slaves. They forgot that they had been praying for relief from that affliction. But they were so quick to say, look, remember all the great things we had there. So, chapter 12. Miriam and Aaron come against Moses. Because his wife was... autocorrect is annoying because here I put Cushite and it says Cushir. Because his wife was a Cushite, and they were questioning whether God had really chosen him to lead the people. Which I found so interesting because Aaron had been with Moses and the Lord from the beginning. Like, why was he questioning Moses' place of leadership that had been given to him by the Lord himself? Like, Aaron wouldn't even be in a position of leadership if it hadn't been for Moses pleading for God to give him someone else. And we see when, especially during the golden calf days, when Aaron was out here helping the people make a golden calf and then lying about it. Moses pleaded against on his behalf, and then here we have them come up against him in first chapter 12. It says, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman, and they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek, and more than all the people who were on the face of the earth. And I also like that the Lord says, he is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in riddles. And he beholds the form of the Lord. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. I think it's interesting that Miriam was the one punished in this situation. She became leprous. I really need to double check maybe I just don't know how to type over here, because this looks like a different language over here. One, Aaron should have known better. And two, I thought it's just interesting that she was punished, so I'm wondering if she was the instigator. I'm wondering if she was the one that was instigating, whispering into Aaron's ear, because she was the one that was punished. Yeah, that's about it. I keep losing my train of thought, and editing this is going to be so much fun. Chapters 13 to 14, this is where God really it's kind of like his last straw with the people. Moses sends out spies to look up the land that the Lord is going to give them, and the people come back saying, the land is great. The spies come back saying, it's great, dripping with milk and honey. It is great, but there are people there, and they're scary. And we should not go. We can't go over there. We cannot take this land. We cannot do this. And I find it interesting because then verses 7 through 9 of 14? Well, even before that, you have Caleb. It says in verse 30 of chapter 13, it says, but Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. And the other men were like, no, we cannot do it. I just found it interesting that out of all the spies and all that stuff, only Caleb and Joshua had the faith to believe that God could make them victorious in this. They had faith that God, I guess these people's faith was not that great, but they had enough faith for God to lead them out of Egypt, but not enough faith to be able to say, we will fight to get our land. So then you see 14:11. The Lord said to Moses, how long will this people despise me, and how long will they not believe in me? In spite of all the signs that I have done among them, I will strike them down with the pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. And then, Moses once again intercedes for these people. He just reminds God, not that God needed to be reminded, but, he's pleading on them. He's like, what will the other nations say? Remember, Lord, you are the Lord that is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and forgiving iniquity and transgressions, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquities of the fathers of children to the third and fourth generations. Please pardon the iniquity of the people according to the greatness of your steadfast love, just as you have forgiven this people and Egypt until now. I'm trying to keep up with my notes and the Bible and my train of thought, and it's going everywhere. Yeah, Moses, because then did they complain again? Oh yeah, the people try to rebel and they were acting a fool. They was rebelling. And, their punishment was that they would have to serve 40 years in the wilderness and never see the promised land. That generation. 40 years. 1 year for every day that the spies had went out to survey the land. And I think that's just so sad, but they kind of deserved it. And when God's giving them their judgment, he says, this is in verse 34, and you shall know my displeasure. That guts me, because I'm like, it's such strong words from the Lord that I hope I never, like, that the Lord's never like, you're gonna know my displeasure. Like, the Lord was so disappointed in them. And I can't even fathom that feeling, how I would feel. Because, we know the feeling of when someone else is disappointed us. Now imagine it's the Lord. My Life Application Bible says, failing to trust God often brings even greater problems than those we originally faced. When we run from God, we inevitably run into problems. I'm just gonna pretend like I know how to read. After God gives his judgment, some of the people decide that now they want to fight. Now they want to go up and, fight for their land and all that stuff. And Moses lets them know that the God is not with them, but they don't listen. Do not go up, for the Lord is not among you, lest you be struck down before your enemies. They don't listen. They die. Then we see some more laws about, sacrifices, unintentional sins, the Sabbath, tassels on the garments, and then we see Korah's rebellion. And this is actually mentioned in the book of Jude. And they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. So it wasn't just any of the men. There were influential men in the camp that decided to rise up against Moses and Aaron. And God has clearly chosen Moses to lead the people. They assembled themselves together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Then why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" And they kind of challenge him. They challenge Moses and they put fire in a censer. And, the Lord clearly has chosen Moses, so they're gonna lose. But it's also interesting, how these men rebelled, but Moses and Aaron were still blamed for their rebellion by the people, and the people of Israel take no accountability for their actions, for the actions of their people, and they blame all their leaders. And this just made me have a different heart for people in leadership, because I can see this playing out in multiple churches and things I've heard. Just it's hard being leadership. No matter what you do, someone is going to have something to say. Whether it's how you handle the situation or how you didn't handle a situation. God did not let these men get away with this. The earth swallowed them whole. And then the other 250 men perished, I believe it says. This is what Moses had actually prayed. But if the Lord creates something new and the ground opens his mouth and swallows them up, that with all that belongs to them, that they go down alive to Shiloh, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord. And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all their people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. And so they that belonged to them went down alive in Shiloh, and the earth closed over them. And they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who was around them fled for their cities, and they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up." And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. So the Lord's kind of I'm tired of you people judging Moses, questioning me, because in reality, they're not questioning Moses. They're questioning God, because God put him into leadership. And that is something we need to be careful with, too, when it comes to our authority, because we'll see it even in the New Testament, where it says that, that all authority is placed there because of the Lord. It's when we're questioning authority and who's there and why they're leading, we're questioning the Lord and what the Lord has allowed to happen. And that is something we need to be reminded of. Then a plague was happening too, because, God was angry. His wrath was being consumed. And Aaron had to go make atonement for their sins, or else they were just going to keep dying. And 1,400 people died, more, rounding the number. And then as we keep reading, we read of the duties of the priests and the Levites, and then laws for purification. And also, I thought a side note, because it mentions here the red heifer. This is the statute of the law that the Lord has commanded. Tell the people of Israel to bring you a red heifer without defect, in which there is no blemish, and on which a yoke has never come. And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and it shall be taken outside the camp and slaughtered for him. This chapter 19. I don't know if any of you guys are aware of this, but currently they have I think 3 red heifers like, this is current, like, present time, 2014, they do have the red heifers over there that they brought from who knows where, I don't remember, but they are waiting, because I think you have to wait till 5 years before you can sacrifice them according to the Old Testament laws, which we are under grace, people. But yeah, they're waiting for them to turn 5 years old so they can try and rebuild the tabernacle and institute all these old laws and sacrifices and things like that. Like, our world is crazy. We are denying Jesus left and right, and they have a red heifer. I believe it was 2020 or 2021 when they did find them. Because, you know, then they bring in these, like, priests from, like, all these things, and because they can't find not one white hair, gray hair, like, no bruising. Like, these are the most highly taken care of cows in life. The heifers are used to purify the priests for their temple duties, and, you know, since they're planning on rebuilding the temple and all that stuff, you need the heifers. And here, I thought it was funny. I put a note here. Once I got to chapter 20, I was like, nearing the end, because I thought there was only 23 chapters in Numbers. There's 33. I was like, just over halfway. Really funny. I was losing my mind. But in chapter 20, Miriam dies. The people complain again because they need water, and you'd think that, you know, after all this time that they would just learn to just ask God. God's there to provide for them, not to, like, make them suffer. But this is kind of where Moses kind of, like, loses it, and he gets all cranky with the people, and which I get. You know, I think we're all like, we get it. We would be just like him. God told him to speak to the rock. Moses hits the rock, and then the water comes out. You know, God still let the miracle happen, but he's like, because of this, you are not making it into the promised land. And we have to remember that Moses is the leader. So, you know, you lead through your actions, through your service, and him directly disobeying the Lord was a big no. But something I do want to do when we get to the book of Joshua is compare the people of Israelites to Christians today. And it's so fascinating because we were going through Judges Joshua. I put the book of Joshua. I meant the book of Judges. The Israelites don't complete the things that the Lord has told them to do, but I think oftentimes we as Christians too often get comfortable with just the little bit that God has given us. He gave us salvation. We're good. I can live my life the way I want to. I'm fine. I'm saved. And we don't continue on. We don't press forward. And that's something that in my Hebrews book, the holiest of all, that's one of the big things that he mentions a lot, is that, you know, so many Christians are content with just living their life in comfort, lukewarm, so to speak. The book makes the comparison that Christians are kind of like the Israelites, where they're content with just being in the wilderness and not pressing forward to the promised land. Hopefully that makes sense. Aaron also will not see the Holy Land, but before he dies, he appoints a new priest, his son Eleazar, and then we get the incident with the bronze serpent, which we do, I think, who mentions it? I think Jesus mentions it in the New Testament when he's talking to the people. Because, you know, we're trying to explain to these people, it's about faith. The people had the audacity to call God's food worthless. They're always complaining about food. But it says, we loathe this worthless food. The audacity. Serpents were sent to bite them, and in order for them to be healed, God told Moses to create a bronze serpent, and people were to look up to the serpent. If they looked up to the serpents, they would be healed. If not, then, you know, death. But I just think it's interesting because that's still another act of faith. It wasn't anything that they had to do but just look up and believe that the serpent was going to heal them because the Lord said it, and they would be healed. In my Bible, but it's amazing how in the OT you can see how God just wanted the people to have faith in him. He wanted them to trust him, and they didn't. Then chapters 22 to 24, it's just the story of the oracle, or he's an oracle? Oracle or sorcerer, and just how the king of the Moabites wanted this man to, like, put a curse on Israel, and he was like, no, I can't do what the Lord's not letting me, like, and this happens 3 times, and he's just like, I can't do it. The Lord, it's just not gonna work. And he ends up blessing them. Balaam was a sorcerer. Sorcerers were thought to have power with the gods. God speaks through Balaam, and there's different passages, Numbers 31 through 16, 2 Peter 2:15, and Judah 1:11. Okay, this little note in my Bible will not stay. And even Balaam's donkey speaks to him. One, the donkey saw the angel of the Lord and was drawn to it. The donkey's mouth was open, and there was a conscious knowledge there. And Balaam did not react to this talking donkey, which I thought was interesting. Like, if my dog just started speaking to me, I would lose it. I would lose it. And this dude, his donkey's talking to him, and he's just like talking back. Very interesting. And it doesn't say if the donkey's mouth was ever closed again or opened again. So I'm just like, so did we just leave this donkey like chatting away? And basically the king of the Moabites just doesn't listen. He keeps going, no, we'll send more people. Like, God reminded him of that. Like, he would not put a curse on these people because, blessed are those that bless Israel and cursed are those that curse him. Sorry about the dog. And then his final oracle, he made some points, but he also said a star shall come out of Jacob. Messiah. There's just a lot of different things pointing to Christ here. Here we see how the people, as we continue on, since they're near the Moabite land, we see how the people of Israel start following the people of Moab and worshiping their gods. It's like true rebellion. And we see the zeal of Phinehas, where Phinehas was the son of Eleazar. And what did he end up doing? He ended up slaughtering people, and because there was a plague, because God was angry. These people just don't really listen and don't realize that, God is going to disconnect you from these people if you can't listen. There's that. And then here's where we get to the new census of the new generation. It's been 40 years, and the new census includes all those that, all the new people that will be going into the promised land. Does not include the people that are from the old generation, besides Caleb and Joshua. In chapters 27, the daughters of Zelophehad, whatever, he had no sons, he is dead, he only had daughters. So I just thought it was interesting how, people love to talk about how God did not care for women and how, women meant nothing, but God agreed that they needed their inheritance. And even so, towards the end, they do have to marry within their families to keep the inheritance within the family tribe. The Lord still provided for them and said, yes, if there are no sons and there are no husbands, the women keep the inheritance and keep it in the family, and they are provided for, which I thought was amazing. Verse 12, God reminds Moses that, he's not going to go into the promised land. Moses does get to see it with his eyes. But God tells him, you need to appoint someone. You're appointing Joshua, the son of Nun, a man who is the Spirit. Now we know who's going to be leading this people after Moses is gone. And then we learn more about the daily offerings, Sabbath offerings, monthly offerings, Passover offerings, offerings for the Feast of Weeks, offerings for the Feast of Trumpets, offerings for the Day of Atonement, offerings for the Feast of Booths, men and women vows, which I thought was another thing that was very interesting, because when men make a vow, their vow sticks. That's it. They make a vow before the Lord, they have to hold that vow. But for women, I thought this was very gracious of the Lord, because I, as a woman, we say things. We are emotional. Men and women think very differently, and we are more emotional. And sometimes we just say things. And I think this was his way of protecting women, where if you were under your father's authority, if he opposed your vow, it did not stand. Same thing with your husband, it would not stand. But if you were divorced or widowed, you would be on your own, so watch your mouth, sister. And I just thought this was another way of the Lord looking out for women. Then as we keep reading, chapter 31, Israel has to fight the Midianites. And this was a little harder for me to read because, first they failed to kill everyone. And at first they didn't kill all the women and all that. But, Moses has them kill the rest of the women, leaving the virgins alone, and killing all children, male children. And that was hard to read, but I understand it in military ways, because, children doesn't necessarily mean that they were 5. They could have been 15, 16, and that would have caused rebellion. You just killed all their people, all their fathers. You just overtook them. And men are different than women. I've said it before, and I understand, but it was still none of the Israelites died. That shows that the Lord is with them. And then we have chapter 32, where the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half tribe of Manasseh decide that they want to their inheritance to be on the east side of the Jordan, I believe. And they do say we will fight and help you guys conquer the promised land, but this is the land we want, and that is the land that they do end up getting. And then here at the end of chapter 33, verses 55 to the end, it says, this is what God is saying: "But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then those of them whom you let remain shall be as barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they shall trouble you in the land where you dwell, and I will do to you as I thought to do to them." And this is where we'll get to in Judges 1, where we see that the Israelites don't listen to the Lord. They don't drive out the people completely. And that is very important, because if you don't drive out the people completely, what ends up happening? Influence from both sides. You end up, this is just how you end up under oppression again, but also you start being influenced by these people for their gods, for the things that they worship that's not the Lord. And that was the Lord's command when they sought out to, start driving out the inhabitants of the land. And then as we keep reading in verses 34, chapter 34, like, the Lord gives them their boundaries for the land, like all the land that's going to be theirs, Israel's, and the list of tribal chiefs. And then we also see he lays out the cities for the Levites and what's going to be theirs, and dwelling places and sanctuary places for people, cities of refuge, I mean. And then chapter 36, we're back to those daughters of that man. And this is where I was just like, these people care way too much about their inheritance. Like, you have the Lord here, you have the Lord in your presence, and all these amazing things, and they're arguing over, if they marry other men outside their out of their tribe, then those tribes are going to get more inheritance. Is it about inheritance? No. But they were so worried about that, hence why the women have to marry within their tribe, and they are married off to men within their tribe. But I just thought that was interesting, that they were very focused on the inheritance. And that is the end of Numbers. Wow, guys, we've made it. If you stuck this far, thank you so much. And I got nothing else to say. I have to finish reading Deuteronomy, and we will chat about that at the end of this week. Hopefully you get a double recap upload this week. And yeah, we will chat, and we will have another video soon on how I actually add notes into my Bible too. So I will chat with you guys in my next video.